So will global growth be a headwind or a tailwind for the market next year? Joining us with his thoughts on that, Larry Adam is the Chief Investment Officer at Raymond James. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us tonight, Larry.
Good to see you, Bill.
What do you think? Tailwind, headwind next year?
Well, I think global growth is going to be a tailwind. I think when you look at what's happened, if we looked at last year at this point in time, it was a totally different story.
Right.
You only had about 15% of global central banks cutting rates. Today, about 65% of global central banks are actually cutting rates, and that tends to act with a lag. So as we get into next year, those should be very stimulative for growth. And then when you look at fiscal policy, we just got a deal for our budget here in the United States this past week, and that's calling for about a 3.5% increase in spending by our government. That should help growth, but more importantly, that's happening globally. Japan just had a $120 billion stimulus, and in fact, their government just raised their GDP forecast to 1.4 next year from 1.2.
Right.
And similar things are happening in Europe and China.
You also point to the U.S. consumer and specifically the job situation.
Well, the job situation continues to be very healthy. In fact, one of our indicators that we like to look at is withholding taxes, because every single week, if you own a business here in the United States, you have to collect the taxes and send it to the government. And right now, that is not only at an all-time record high, but it continues to grow at about a 5% rate, which means there's either more people working or they're getting paid more. But either way, the heart of the U.S. economy, the consumer, has more money to spend. So that's a big positive as we go into next year.
I'm going to be the wet blanket here. I get nervous when it sounds like we feel like we've figured things out completely. What could go wrong next year? What would keep you up?
Well, one thing that I think you mentioned, it was that survey that we just heard from Merrill Lynch, and that is that everybody's on the same page.
Right.
And I think it's fine to run with the herd for a while, but the big trick is obviously when do you kind of pull away from the herd. I think we're still fine. One of the things that's very positive in my mind is that it is an election year, and two things happen in election years. Number one, it's very rare to go into a recession, and number two, it's rare that the equity markets have a sell-off in an election year. So because of that, I still feel pretty positive and good for this upcoming year.
Very good. Larry Adam with Raymond James. Again, thanks for joining us tonight, Larry.
Thank you very much.